Is it the end of the line for that bunch of a-holes? And am I talking about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 or the writer's strike? Well, we're talking a little bit about both on today's episode of the Geek Watch Podcast.
This is the Geek Watch Podcast with Brian Hatcher and Mandy Petrie.
Greetings, Geek Watchers, and welcome to episode 188 of the Geek Watch Podcast. I'm Brian Hatcher, and with me, as always, Geek Watch's own resident geek goddess, Mandy Petrie.
Hello, Brian.
Let's start off with the Meg. We got a Meg 2 trailer.
Yes, we've got it all. We've got dinosaurs. It's very much the next step up. It looks gloriously... It's going to be a great summer for monster movies.
Yeah, for sure. I have to ask you, though, since you have seen the trailer, and all puns intended, as you well know, have they finally jumped the shark?
Well, some could argue that the Meg itself was jumping the shark, but absolutely not. No, I want more Meg. I want just as many Sharknadoes. I want them all.
Obviously, they know their audience. They know what you want.
Mm-hmm.
They want big shark action, and it looks like you're going to get a lot of that. So.
Yeah, and now we really have T-Rex versus Megalodon, and we get to see how who wins.
Yeah, I have to say, people who are into that kind of thing, this is the kind of thing they're going to be into. And he knows what it is. And it's not trying to be anything that it's not. It's supposed to be goofy, silly, giant, massive shark fun. And it looks like it's really going to deliver there. And while we still have movies, it's great that we're getting a few of them. So I have been keeping up with the writer's strike. There's not been a whole lot of negotiation. We are on, at this point, day 9. And we are getting a lot of interesting strike signs. Some of them have little white spaces underneath so people can write their own little slogans in.
Yes.
And somebody was carrying a sign that said, AI doesn't have childhood trauma.
Yeah, I've seen the ones that say, I'm an actor and I don't know what to say. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that because here is, we'll say, the second act of this melodrama is about ready to play out because the Directors Guild of America is now starting talks with the motion picture and television producers because their contract, as well as the SAG contract, the Screen Actors Guild, both come up at about the same time, which is June 7th. So clock is ticking there. And, of course, the directors are saying the same thing that the actors are saying. How come you guys are making all this money on streaming and we're not seeing any of it? Mm-hmm. So they're saying the same thing. Right. And a lot of people with the Directors Guild, they feel like their strike's not going to last that long because they said, look, they can ignore the writers for a little while, but if we show up and Screen Actors Guild shows up and we're saying the same thing and they don't deal with us and they let us strike, that's it. They're done. They're shut down. They can't do that. And so they're going to have to negotiate.
Right.
And I can see that because even if you're of the mind that, hey, AI is going to be able to write screenplays for you, you're still going to have people direct them and act. Mm-hmm. At this point, we haven't gotten to a place where AI is going to be able to make a movie completely from scratch. You're not going to be able to get an AI script directed by an AI director that's directing AI actors and creating AI scenes. There's still some part of creativity that needs to go into this. The problem that I see is that if they capitulate to the directors and the Screen Actors Guild about the streaming, they're going to have to do the same thing with the writers. They can't turn around and then say, well, we're not going to give you guys anything. Even if they could do something like that, you're still going to see things get shut down because without the scripts, we're still trying to recover from this dry spell of COVID and things being shut down. But one of the things that is different from this writer's strike, the Teamsters are completely supporting them this time around.
Oh,
in other words,
way to go.
Yeah, so basically what they're saying is that there are 2 people picketing. It only has to be 2, but if there's 2 people with signs picketing, we will not cross that line.
Good.
And that's going to be massive. They've started picketing a bunch of things like the MTV.
Yeah, they canceled MTV News and they laid off a bunch of people.
Yeah.
Was that Paramount? Who?
Yeah, well,
whoever owns them. I can't remember off the top of my head who owns them.
I'm trying to remember. Yeah, basically the MTV, I think it was the Movie Awards, because it was picketed, they just shut the whole thing down and they did it pre-recorded. And I think it was, who was hosting it this year? I was trying to remember who was hosting it, but they dropped out. There was no point in trying to bring people in. And so they went to basically tape.
Let them go see like blank teleprompters. Stand up on stage and you can't even read the card at that point.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, but I know they canceled MTV News and there were a bunch of layoffs going on. So a couple of shows got canceled.
First of all, it surprised me that MTV News was still going on.
I know. That was another thing.
I was surprised MTV was still going on. I thought they were gone. Well, I thought that they basically, it was like 24/7 ridiculousness.
Mm-hmm. And Beavis and Butthead came back on, and I'm pretty sure was that Paramount?
Yeah, I think that was Paramount.
Okay, they brought them back. So.
Because they weren't really showing that stuff on MTV, which is a shame because I'm old enough to remember old school MTV when they had music videos, and some other stuff too. They had some original programming that I thought was pretty cool. Of course, I'm old enough to remember when it was basically an hour's worth of videos that got played over and over again. So,
Walk the Dinosaur, Mickey, and
Video killed the radio star.
Yes.
So. But Drew Barrymore, that was who was hosting, I believe.
Oh, yeah.
So, there you go. Give me enough time and I'll remember,
pop into your
possibly remember something. But as of right now, there's no kind of negotiation going on between the writers and the producers, but we do have this clock ticking, and we have some pre-negotiations going on between the directors. And I figure Screen Actors Guilds, they're going to start here pretty soon as well. And so a lot of what happens on the table there is going to determine, I think, this writer's strike. But it's really good.
I want happy writers, because happy writers make good content.
Well, as someone who has written, there's no such thing technically as a happy writer, but a writer that can pay their rent and buy food is pretty awesome.
A not hungry writer.
That would be wonderful. But while we still have things to talk about, and there are still movies, let's talk about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, which I have to say, when you see a movie like that in IMAX 3D, it's understandable why you would say it's the greatest movie ever made. Because any movie that plays on IMAX 3D is the greatest movie that was ever made.
Okay.
Black Panther Wakanda Forever?
Best movie ever made.
Greatest movie ever made. Spider-Man Homecoming? Greatest movie ever made. Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness? Greatest movie ever made. It, Chapters 1 and 2? Greatest movie ever made. Even though it was a horribly stupid idea for me to go have a 60-foot killer clown dancing in my lap. And I still have nightmares from that, but still, they were the greatest movies ever made. So, yeah, greatest movie ever made. Yes, this was definitely a movie, first of all, that James Gunn decided, hey, we are going to get to do this in IMAX 3D, so let's rock this thing. And, of course, it gave me the opportunity to see some other trailers for movies that'll be coming out, like Oppenheimer, which was shot in IMAX. And it's going to be IMAX 3D. And the idea of seeing, just even in the trailer, seeing the atomic bomb explosion. This is going to be epic. Okay. It's going to be an epic movie. And I'm looking forward to seeing it.
So, Dune? Are we getting Dune in IMAX?
I would assume so. I would assume so.
Shai Hulud.
Yeah.
In IMAX. I can't even picture, giant sand asshole right in your face in IMAX. That's
whatever it's going to look like. It, of course, will be the greatest movie ever made. But I don't want to spoil too much. I know you haven't seen it yet, and of course you're going to be waiting until it's in home video. So.
Probably, yeah.
So it'll be the greatest movie.
It will be the greatest movie ever made on my little TV.
At that moment, yes. There are some things generally I can say about it. It's definitely a wrap up of the 3. Because obviously, again, not going into any kind of spoilers about this, but the team is going to change. They're not going to be the same after the end of this. There are some parts of this movie where James Gunn taps you on the shoulder and goes, oh, by the way, you may have forgotten, but I direct horror movies as well. And here is cute little animals, and I'm going to do horrible, terrible things too.
Yeah. Oh.
And I don't think this is much of a spoiler, but I will say that there is a scene where the Guardians find out exactly what happens to Rocket. And you pan through and you're seeing all of these faces, and you see Mantis just openly sobbing. Now, you hear what happens. You don't get to see everything because, well, we don't want a hard R movie because this would have been a hard R movie. But you get Mantis sobbing, Peter Quill, who's obviously upset and angry. You get Nebula, and we know what Nebula went through with Thanos.
Yeah.
And Nebula saying, what Thanos put me through was nothing compared to this. You realize, oh, this is not good. And to be honest, the fact they don't show you and they let you imagine it makes it worse.
Thanks, James Gunn. We understand you make horror movies and you know what you're doing. We get it.
Yeah. A lot of the stuff that's implied, but some of the stuff that you see, it's not pleasant. And there are some moments, especially when you see what Rocket went through and why, and he makes friends, but what happens to his friends? It is horrendous. And, you know, when you're dealing with vivisection and amputations and grafting metal into people's bodies, it's serious body horror and it's terrible. But then do that to these animals with these big, wide eyes. It makes it worse. It really, and then you give them the ability to talk.
Yeah. And call you on your shit.
Yeah. And again, this is a bit of a spoiler. I won't even spoil it. I'll just say that Rocket's first words are, oh, God.
Okay.
The first time you hear him talk, it's like the worst thing he could have said. It's very simple, but it's dreadful. It's absolutely dreadful. And especially in the condition that he's in when he says them, because he's just been experimented on and things have been done to him. And it's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. There's a lot of stuff that goes on in this movie. There's a lot of character development. We wanted to know Rocket's backstory, or at least we thought we did. And then we get it. Be careful what you ask for. But again, it was a lot of fun. Definitely the battle scenes were amazing and 60 foot tall and in my lap. There is a pseudo one-shot hallway fight scene. I mean, obviously that's not exactly what happened because there's editing and there's a lot of digital property and all of this and a lot of FX. But they made it look like it's a single shot. And, oh, man, it's amazing. It is fantastic. And I will say also, there were little nods to the DC stuff in there.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because Ratcatcher 2 has a role in this movie. There were a couple of cameos from Peacemaker.
Wow.
Because, of course, everybody's saying, is James Gunn going to put his wife in everything now? But
why not?
But she was amazing in the role. And it was a small role. And, of course, we're dealing with animals. And one animal...
Eagly?
The name was on the cage and everything. So we got an Eagly cameo.
Oh, yay!
So look out for that. But there were a bunch of really interesting cameos in there. But yeah, we got Eagly in this. So we got our crossover. Everybody's talking about the Marvel DC crossover. We already got it. Eagly was there. I really liked the stuff that was going on with Adam Warlock. Although it wasn't like the main thrust of the story, I really did enjoy how they were able to incorporate him in there and the Sovereign because they're back. But their relationship to the story I found really interesting as well. There was a couple places where they could have misstepped story-wise, especially when it comes to the situation between Peter Quill and Gamora. There were certain things you could have done in that situation that would have been, that doesn't quite work. But the way that James Gunn played the hand he was dealt, basically, I thought he did an amazing job with it.
Good.
An amazing film to end that 3 series. Now, there isn't anything that's going to stop anybody from continuing to do Guardians of the Galaxy movies. It's basically set up, so if they want to do any more of them, obviously with another writer-director, they can do it. And they're certainly planning on doing something with Star-Lord because at the end, there was a message about Star-Lord will return.
Okay.
So, the famous Star-Lord will return, but they don't say anything more than that.
Okay.
But at least we're going to see more Star-Lord. That's going to be way down the road because they've got a lot of other stuff they're going to have to develop first. And going back to the damn writer's strike, we have to wait for that to be settled, and then they can start new things. But eventually they're going to run out of stuff, and a lot of this is going to be on hold for a while.
Definitely.
But I feel like that this was, to my mind, the perfect way to end that
trilogy.
series, that trilogy of movies. And I feel like it really did develop the characters. It let us know pretty much what we wanted to know about everybody. And we got Rocket's story that we wanted until we got it. And then it was like, that was difficult. There were a bunch of times I wept.
Yeah.
And the thing about it, too, was we all know going into this story, this is James Gunn's last story. So he knows that we understand that anybody could die. And he took advantage of that.
Oh.
He did.
Man.
And that's pretty much all I'm going to say about that. Anybody could go on the chopping block. And he plays on that a lot. And there were a lot of scenes that were in the trailer. You look at that and you're like, did they just kill off a character? And maybe they didn't. You want to go in the theater and make your bets. Okay, who's going to live and who's going to die?
Do a pool.
You do
Make a few bucks.
Do a Deadpool. It might not be a too bad idea to maybe put a couple of tissues in your pocket before you go.
Because there were a preparing for that.
Yeah, just in the Rocket story.
Yeah.
And the way that it ended, I'm going to miss a bunch of these people. That's all I'm going to say. But yeah, I absolutely do recommend this movie. It was a lot of fun. And if you do get the chance of seeing it on the big screen with the 3D glasses on, definitely do that because it was epic in all sense of the word. They knew they were shooting it in IMAX, and there's so many beautiful, epic scenes and a lot of crazy stuff that goes on. And Nathan Fillion, but without a mask this time. So. And a very entertaining character, I have to say there. But we get so much out of this movie. It was so much fun. I enjoyed it, and probably am going to catch it
it on a smaller screen?
Maybe. A bigger, smaller screen, but it was an entertaining ride. It was a longer movie, but you didn't feel the time. It didn't drag ever. But it's worth definitely checking out, and when it comes out, you're definitely going to have to see it.
I shall see.
And with that said, we come to the end of episode 188. Thank you for listening, and tune in next time for the latest in geek news and views with the Geek Watch podcast. For Mandy Petrie, this is Brian Hatcher, reminding all the Geek Watchers out there, we're all geeky about something. Be proud of yours. See you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Geek Watch podcast. If you enjoyed this program, don't forget to like and subscribe on your preferred platform and share this podcast on your social media. For links to all the ways you can listen to the Geek Watch podcast, as well as leave comments and suggestions, visit our website at geekwatch.net. The Geek Watch podcast is a Hanging J production.